Welcome to the second part of my Fate power scaling series. Today I will be going over how strong servants actually are. The term servant itself has been incredibly bastardized, with the definition of the term having lost a bit of meaning over the run of Fate Grand Order. This is why some normies still have trouble determining whether Gilgamesh being the strongest servant has been retconned or not, as they lack the tools and knowledge necessary to realize that there's context behind that original claim. It's not that the term has been retconned, but that you aren't factoring in the information that made that claim true in the first place. As such, today I will go over what servants actually are, how their strength is measured, and what sets them apart from the rest of the Fateverse. I hope you enjoy it. First, we need to establish what a heroic spirit is, as the terms servant and heroic spirit aren't synonyms. A heroic spirit is a soul, that is, a higher dimensional life form. However, what makes a heroic spirit different from the soul of a normal human is that the former belongs to a person who achieved great deeds in life and was worshipped after death. These are entities that have been able to persevere in humanity's collective unconscious throughout the span of time, being mainly divided between historical figures like Alexander the Great or characters from myth and legend like King Arthur. These souls are stored like books in a pseudo-library in a higher dimension called the Throne of Heroes. In Fate, the Earth has a defensive mechanism called the Counterforce. This counterforce is formed by two different aspects: Gaia, the will of the planet, and Alaya, the collective unconscious of humanity. Heroic spirits are regarded as aspects of this second entity, and their objective is to protect the human order. In other words, the human world and history. This is why the existence of heroic spirits affirms human history, as opposed to dead apostles, which are entities that defy it. On the other hand, a servant would be a magical vessel that's been artificially created to house that soul. The primordial servants created by the Counterforce are called Grand Servants, and they were created for the sole purpose of placing 7 of them against a singular enemy threatening the human order itself: the Beasts. For context, imagine Yuta Okotsu from Jujutsu Kaisen. As a special grade sorcerer, Yuta meets the criteria to overthrow a country single-handedly. He also has more cursed energy than Gojo, who could power the United States of America for a whole year. Now imagine that Yuta died and was resurrected in a special body. Rather than his normal human body, imagine he was resurrected in a special vessel, created by the world itself, to fight entities capable of threatening all life on the planet. How much stronger would he be? Well, that's basically what a Grand Servant is. Leaving Grand Servants aside, we have normal servants participating in the Fuyuki Holy Grail War. These servants are the result of the Ainsburn, Tosaka, and Makiri mage families copying the original heroic spirit ritual for their own personal interests. Rather than summoning 7 heroes to take down a common enemy, the mages summon them to fight one another in a battle royale. Their souls are then used as fuel to power the Holy Grail and recreate the third magic, opening a path to the swirl of the root, the source of all existence. A ritual created by mages as opposed to the entire human unconscious is why the Holy Grail War Servants are extremely degraded copies of the original Grand Servants, making them akin to third-rate multi-purpose familiars compared to the originals. It's not a matter of how the living heroes compare to one another, but rather the vessels they are summoned in. However, this does not mean servants are weaker than their living counterparts. Servants are weaker than Grand Servants, but how they generally compare to their living counterparts is a case-by-case scenario. In fact, some servants are actually stronger than their living selves. A servant's power is generally influenced by 3 factors: how strong they were in life, their fame, and their master. The first one is self-explanatory. Someone who could kill gods, blow up mountains, and move at hypersonic speeds has an advantage over a normal dude who stole money from the rich to give it to the poor. However, it's not a definitive factor. Since heroic spirits are formed by Alaya, their existences are directly tied to how humanity perceives them. Heroes who are remembered and revered for their deeds are stronger than those who aren't as well known. This is why when a servant is summoned in their home country, their strength can sometimes be increased by over 66%. Moreover, humanity's unconscious can greatly influence them to the point that their legends might even grant them new abilities. Vlad the Impaler is a great example, as his servant counterpart gained an entirely new noble phantasm that transforms him into a vampire due to Bram Stoker's Dracula having reshaped how humanity perceives him. Finally, there is the Master. Servants need a mage to act as their anchor to the modern world and supply them with magical energy. As such, a servant with a weak master who has limited energy reserves might not be able to be supplied with enough fuel to fight at full strength. Now that we've covered their lore, we can move on to parameters, the honey trap for newcomers. In the world of magecraft, mages use a letter-based grading system to measure everything worth measuring. The numeric values of each letter generally go as follows. E is the weakest, while A is the highest, with each letter being 10 units higher than the previous one. E equals 10, D equals 20, C equals 30, B equals 40, and A equals 50. Moreover, we have the plus modifier, which means the value of that stat can be temporarily doubled. For example, if a C rank equals 30, then C plus equals 60, and C plus plus equals 90. Based on this scale, A plus and A plus plus would be 100 and 150 respectively, meaning an A plus plus rank at its peak would generally be 15 times stronger than an E rank. Finally, there's the EX rank. EX means that a value cannot be measured, either because it surpasses the grading system, because it possesses an ability that can't be quantified with raw numbers, or because it fluctuates. For example, Richard I has EX rank agility, despite being slower than Achilles because his speed increases the longer he fights. Masters have an innate ability granted by the Holy Grail that allows them to measure the stats of any servant they gaze upon, giving them an idea of how strong the spirit is. The parameters are strength, endurance, agility, magical power, luck, and noble phantasm. Each servant container created for the Holy Grail War has a set of default base parameters. A template, if you like. As you can see, the 3 knight classes led by Saber are physically the strongest, while Caster is the weakest. However, I reiterate that these are just the template stats. These values are then modified based on the specific strengths of each heroic spirit. These parameters have been referenced quite a few times in universe. For example, all of Mordred's stats being C rank or above was regarded as truly impressive and fitting of the Saber class, the strongest of the 7. On the other hand, in Fate Stay Night, we see how all of Artoria's stats increased by 1 rank when her master became Rin rather than Shiro. Another point worth touching on is that the ranks used for Noble Phantasms follow their own scale. According to Artoria, a C rank Noble Phantasm would be equivalent to an A or A plus rank physical strike. Going back to our parameters chart, we know that C equals 30, A equals 50, and A plus equals 100. As such, for a C rank NP to be equal to A rank strikes, that would mean Noble Phantasm ranks are generally 1.66 to 3.33 times stronger than base stats. Following this logic, an A++ Noble Phantasm like Excalibur would have a value of 250 to 500 units. For comparison, we know Enuma Elish is 20 times stronger than Gilgamesh's own strength, which is B rank 40. That means on this scale, a full power E would have a value of 800. Using this scale alone, Enuma Elish would be 1.6 to 3.2 times stronger than Excalibur. On the other hand, another statement says that A+ rank Noble Phantasms have power approaching true magic. Taking this at face value, that would mean true magic would have a value ranging between 166 and 333. To finish off the Noble Phantasm section, I would like to note that according to Nasu, the author, an average Noble Phantasm would be B rank. In our parameter scale, that equates to 66 to 133 units. In summary, our parameter-based scale would look something like this. Now, before I move on, I should point out 3 major issues that arise from scaling using stats. I dub this the honey trap of normies. Firstly, stats don't give us the full picture of how strong a servant is. For example, Karna has B rank strength. However, when combined with his great skill, he is able to deliver powerful A rank blows, as shown in his battle against Siegfried. This proves that trying to scale a servant's attack power solely based on their stats is a futile task, as their skill could significantly increase it, or perhaps even reduce it if they lack combat expertise. Following this trend, we also have the agility stat. If you look carefully at the stat's description, agility measures both quickness, running speed, and reaction speed, combat speed. Therefore, it likely means the agility stat is actually the average value of those 2 factors. For example, you could theoretically have a servant with A rank combat speed and E rank travel speed display only C rank agility. Another example is a quote from Nasu confirming that the fastest servants in Stay Night are Medusa and Ku Chulin, with Medusa being the best at travel speed while Ku has the highest combat speed. However, if you look at their stats, you will see that the 2 of them have A rank agility, whereas Sasaki Kojiro has A+. Finally, the last point that makes parameters unreliable is that they aren't even meant to be used for power scaling. In an interview, Nasu explained how he comes up with parameters, and as you can see, not once does he mention basing them on lore or power levels. What he actually focuses on is avoiding repeating letters as much as possible, even mentioning how it's an old RPG rule to maintain balance between different characters. He concludes by saying that there's actually a 7th secret stat that ranks the overall power level of a character, and that it's not as if the other parameters alone decide how strong someone is. For these reasons, you should never rank characters based on their parameters. That's a traditional mistake normies make. The author simply never expected you to use them that way. If you want to scale servants, you should do it like in any other series, based on feats and statements. Now, I'm not saying parameters are completely useless. Characters have still used them in-universe to rank some servants, which gives us a canonical official tier list to use as a template, the one I'm showing on screen. For example, both Chiron and Achilles are stated in the FGO and Apocrypha collab to be incredibly powerful, even among A-rank servants. Other A-rank servants include Artoria, Heracles, Charles Babbage, Karna, Waver, and Enkidu. At E-rank, we have Anderson, with Lost Belt 1 implying that he has the lowest parameters in all of Chaldea, followed by Salieri, Shakespeare, and Avispron. On the other hand, at B rank, we have Amaya Alter. Another interesting character is Elizabeth Bathory. While suppressed, she was stated to be somewhere between B+ and A rank. Finally, the only confirmed EX rank servant is Gilgamesh, particularly the version from CCC, which didn't have a servant class. There are some A rank servants like Karna and Enkidu who match Gilgamesh in power. However, what sets the latter apart is that he has the original for every noble phantasm, meaning he can exploit the weakness of any heroic spirit if he puts his mind to it. I presume his great firepower combined with his great compatibility is what grants him his individual rank. Leaving ranks aside, we also have top servants. In Fate, a top servant, Tapu Savanto in Japanese, is an official term used in the world of magecraft to refer to specific characters. This isn't like when Naruto fans arbitrarily argue whether Hiruzen is a top-tier Kage. In Fate, the rank of top servant is clearly defined. The term top servant was first coined in Fate Extella. It refers to heroes among heroes, servants who were handpicked by the Moon Cell itself to handle threats. Unlike the servants in the Moon Holy Grail War, which are summoned by human wizards, these top servants are summoned by the Moon Cell using special vessels. There are a total of 7 top servants: Gilgamesh, Karna, Arjuna, Artoria, Scathach, Iskandar, and Joan d'Arc. These 7 are regarded as the best and strongest in all of Seraph, meaning they should all scale above Gawain, Berserker Lancelot, Emilia, Nero Claudius, and others. While the characters featured on screen aren't formally ranked against one another, we have statements that help us grasp their power. For example, Xian is considered the weakest top servant, whereas Karna is considered strong even by top servant standards. Then there is Gilgamesh, the strongest heroic spirit in the Moon Cell catalog. According to Hakuno, he is incomparable to the top servants. Given that Karna is stated to be equal to Gilgamesh in that same game, this likely accounts for how Gilgamesh is not just powerful but can also exploit the weaknesses of every hero he fights. While those are the 7 standard top servants the Moon Cell summoned throughout the games, a few additional characters have been compared to them, such as Altera, Romulus, Charlemagne, Rex Magnus, and Elizabeth Void. The term has also appeared in Fate Grand Order. The problem, however, is that the English translators often lack the consistency to recognize that Tapu Savanto should be translated as top servant. Consequently, it is generally mistranslated as top-tier servant or high-end heroic spirit. The most egregious example is a translation calling Karna a really powerful servant. Additional top servants introduced in FGO include Saber Alter, Castor Ku, Canis, the Cerberus in Atlantis, Kriemhild while empowered by 2 Holy Grails, Mash in Lost Belt 7, and Parvati. Moreover, in Ordeal Call 4, we are told that the First Order Angels, also called the Seraphim, are beyond top servant level. In conclusion, the term top servant is essentially a rank attributed to the best of the best, the tip of the iceberg. There are obviously more characters who would scale to this level, like Achilles or Heracles, but knowing who is officially confirmed helps clarify what the term means. Another point worth touching upon is that not every entity with a Saint Graph summoned in FGO is a top servant. As I mentioned, you can be above top servant level, which implies there is a ceiling to this tier. Logically, that ceiling is set by individuals like Gilgamesh and Karna. This is why I cringe when I say top servants aren't strong enough to do Y or Z, only to get comments saying that BB, King Protea, MHX, or Tiamat did it. These people have no clue what a top servant is. It would be like saying Phase 1 MCU Hulk isn't planet level, only for someone to bring up Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet, reducing the universe to atoms. Where is the correlation? I swear, some people are outraged by everything but ashamed of nothing. If you say stuff like that, I can tell you haven't played any of the Fate Extra games. How do you have the audacity to lecture others on how strong those characters are? Whatever, bro. Okay, now that we have an idea of what servants are and how they compare to one another, we can finally start going over how strong they actually are. In terms of speed, first-rate servants are consistently supersonic, with higher ends placing them at hypersonic and relativistic tiers. Furthermore, it is stated that moving at the speed of light would make short work of even an A-rank servant. For example, Meltrilus, a divine spirit class alter ego that's stronger than Gilgamesh, was nerfed to the point she could hardly handle Tristan after moving at FTL speeds once. Similarly, in Olympus, not even Mash or Musashi could react to the Dioscuri twins, who move at the speed of light. In fact, even the Dioscuri, the Greek gods of light themselves, take fatal damage when using their authority to move FTL. People only ever disagree with this by either disregarding how places like imaginary number space actually work, or by taking information out of context. I already went over every single speed feat in the Fate franchise in previous videos, so I won't repeat myself. However, I think addressing a few counter-arguments won't harm anyone. For example, we have Iskandar supposedly dodging Excalibur at point-blank range. First of all, we have direct confirmation that not even A-rank servants can move faster than light, FTL, without taking lethal damage. Secondly, Excalibur has never been stated to move at the speed of light. We just have generic statements calling it a beam of light, which could be taken metaphorically. Thirdly, if we go by the anime, the light of the attack actually reached Iskandar before the beam ever touched his chariot, as we see Iskandar's entire body engulfed by light, while his chariot was still charging forward. That would debunk Excalibur in the anime moving at the speed of light. Finally, the light novel never states that Iskandar dodged Excalibur after it had already been fired. For all we know, he could have simply jumped out of the way while Artoria was swinging down her arms, right before activating the Noble Phantasm. These points mean that for Iskandar to be FTL, you need to establish two premises. First, that Excalibur really moves at light speed, and most importantly, that the anime got it wrong by animating the light reaching Iskandar before the attack itself. However, if you admit that the anime is wrong there, then how can you claim it's right when it shows Iskandar reacting to it after it was fired? As I already said, that's never brought up in the light novel. Do you cherry-pick the anime showings you like and disregard those you don't? Concerning Iskandar, we also have a scene from a side story in Fate Extella, where he supposedly claims that Cuchulainn attacks faster than the speed of light. This is a mistranslation. If you actually look at the kanji, the words for light or faster than aren't there. He just questions whether the nickname Distant Afterimage was referring to him. As for strength, we have a direct statement from the author, Nasu. When asked how strong servants are, he said their offensive capabilities are on par with a fighter jet. He went on to compare their noble phantasms to the nuclear warheads those jets carry. Moreover, he specified that a jet wouldn't be able to wipe out an entire city in one go, and that some modern weapons actually exceed servants in sheer destructive capability. This means servants generally range between multi-city block and large town level. However, what makes servants special is that they are beings of mystery, meaning they can negate all damage from conventional weapons. This displacement from common logic is what sets servants apart, not their raw firepower. The average servant being at town level is consistent with several statements throughout the franchise. For example, in Fate Zero, Iskandar's chariot was compared to a strategic bomber, with the narrator claiming he could level the entire Shinto area in less than an hour. In Stay Night, Shiro claims Heracles could destroy a house or two with a single blow, potentially destroying a whole town in one night. We also see Rin surprised that an A+ rank NP didn't destroy a building, and Artoria believing she could only tank an attack as long as it remained below building level. In Fate Strange Fake, Hansa Cervantes mentions he could potentially deal as much damage as a nuclear missile. Hansa is a match for Jester, who is confirmed to be capable of fighting a servant 1v1. Hansa is so strong that Jester mistook him for a member of the burial agency, and executioners capable of fighting dead apostle ancestors and servants. So the average servant being on this level is consistent. Furthermore, Karna's Brahmastra Kundala has been compared to nuclear weapons in various guides. Finally, in the Shinjuku Singularity, Saber Altar required help from Mia Altar to completely destroy the Bennu asteroid, a real-life object with a 500-meter diameter. Overall, city level is a conservative mid-ball estimate for these characters. The weakest fraud behavior occurs in the Salem Singularity with Charles-Henri Sanson and Robin Hood. While nerfed to 50% of their usual strength, these two were essentially on par with normal humans, fearing they would actually die if they made an enemy of the entire village. That being said, we have seen servants exceed city level. For instance, Heracles in Stay Night was stated to be capable of destroying a mountain while fighting Saber Altar. In Fate Zero, the three noble phantasms Gilgamesh fired against Gil de Rice monster were said to be capable of splitting mountains. In FGO, Mordred claims she could destroy a mountain, and Fergus's Caladbolg is stated to slice through the tops of 3 hills. In the Agartha Singularity, Fergus's child version destroyed a small island, though it should be noted he achieved this by sacrificing himself. Additionally, the rotation of Ea's 3 cylinders is compared to the movement of tectonic plates. In Fate Strange Fake, the second strongest meteorite fired by Thea Escardos' NP destroyed 12% of the Arctic, 500,000 square kilometers, in an instant. The strongest was said to be capable of destroying all of Snowfield, but it was blocked by Gugalana. Gugalana itself is stronger than the living Gilgamesh, as it took both Gilgamesh and Enkidu using their full strength to barely defeat it. Gugalana's most impressive feat involves scaling above the storm surrounding it, which are 100 times stronger than a magnitude 9 earthquake. That is continental level, if I'm not mistaken. Finally, we have a statement from the Shinjuku Singularity where Da Vinci confirms that not even a top servant can destroy an entire planet. This means no one in this category is a planet buster. Da Vinci explains that even if an anti-planet NP existed, Earth would be an exception because it is protected by the counterforce and the human order. A few clarifications. Da Vinci makes 2 distinct claims. First, top servants are below planet level. Second, Earth is above planet level. As we know from Ordeal Call 3, most planets in Fate are the same as in real life. Only a select few are infused with a soul and develop textures, a Avalon, and intelligent life. Therefore, anti-planet refers to normal planets. I know that characters compared to nuclear bombs and mountain-level destruction being below planet level seems insane to some, but it is what it is. On the other hand, some people have no clue what textures are. I've seen many claims that the human texture on the surface of the planet Earth is infinite in size, but this has never been stated or implied. Those who argue this often use scans out of context or rely on mistranslations. For example, in Fate Strange Fake, there is a line claiming the entire universe was compressed by Ia. Surprise, surprise, the word universe, uchu in Japanese, is not used once in that scene. The text actually says that creation is being compressed, which, in context, refers to the texture on the surface of the planet. After all, that is what the god Ea created 4.6 billion years ago. Whenever the story mentions Ea recreating Genesis, that is what they are referring to. The power that was used to stabilize the surface of the planet, which was originally a ball of gas and magma. Other mistranslations include the claim that Enuma Elish in Fate Zero is capable of destroying the universe. If you listen carefully to what Waver actually says in that scene, the word used is Sekai, which means world, not universe. The same thing happened in FGO Babylonia when Tiamat used Megagenesis. On the other hand, I have also seen people claiming that timelines are different textures placed upon the same singular planet. This is debunked by multiple versions of the Earth's soul, that being archetype Earth, existing on different timelines. Similarly, we know there are multiple alternate versions of Avalon. Otherwise, prototype Merlin wouldn't be a thing. All these facts show that different timelines do have their own alternate planets with their own soul and textures. In fact, we see in FGO that the Lost Belts can house several textures, as shown in Atlantis or Britain, the latter of which had its own reverse side of the world. On a similar note, some people are even more extreme and claim that the human texture contains all parallel worlds within it, so destroying the texture makes you multiversal. This is a bit more nuanced, as it requires breaking down how the human order and quantum mechanics work in Fate. But again, simply use logic. The reverse side of the world is a texture outside the human world. If the human texture contained parallel worlds, Lost Belt 6 wouldn't have its own reverse side. Similarly, if the texture contained all of proper human history, then that would mean every time someone destroyed the world, like Gilgamesh or Sifar in Lost Belt 6, the entire multiverse would have been destroyed, which is clearly not the case. Godia needed 3,000 years of prep time and the destruction of 7 human order foundations to indirectly destroy a fraction of human history. Finally, I've seen people argue that Ea splitting the heavens and earth makes it universal, assuming heavens in this context refers to the entire universe. Again, there's no quote supporting this. In Mesopotamia, the texture is divided into 3 sections: the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. The kanji used for earth here is chi, which means land, ground, or soil. Earth with capital E, the actual planet, would be Chikyu. The quotes saying Ea split heaven and earth apart aren't talking about the whole planet, but rather the ground and the sky. This is why the underworld, a place located inside the earth, is also one of the 3 elements that made up the Mesopotamian world, a place you could reach by digging underground. Moreover, Ishtar literally tells us that both the underworld and the heavens became metaphysical when the Age of Gods ended. To anyone with a brain, it's clear that heavens here refers to the magical realm where gods reside, not the literal universe. That is why it disappeared once the world entered the Age of Man. Acting as the pillar that split a magical realm away from the soil does not make it universal. Finally, we know that the underworld in Mesopotamia is finite in size. Not only is it a physical place located inside Earth, but Tiamat was able to cover it entirely with the Sea of Life in a matter of seconds. This is the same Sea of Life that needed several days to cover the Indian Ocean, which proves the underworld is significantly smaller. If the underworld is finite in size, the heavens, the other side of the coin, should be finite in size. There's simply no evidence of the heavens being infinite. Thinking rationally, knowing that servants are generally town to mountain level, and that Enuma Elish is only 20 times stronger than Gilgamesh's B rank strength should be a clear indicator that Ea is not infinitely stronger than everyone else. What makes Ea special is simply that it is anti-world, meaning it can disrupt textures on a conceptual level. All Ea does is create a rupture in space that generates a void within the texture, causing it to get turned inside out. It's an effect similar to when you open a drain, causing water to fall into it, or the infamous Titan submersible implosion, which collapsed instantly due to a sudden change in its internal pressure. Gilgamesh basically creates a conceptual void that sucks the texture inside out. This is why Enkidu's own Enuma Elish counters its destruction. It punctures the texture and stitches it back up like a surgeon closing a wound. It is a hack's feat, not one of raw firepower. This is why Ea can be matched with sheer firepower, even if you lack the ability to harm space-time the way E does. Okay guys, that's it for today. I think we've covered everything major. Now that we have an idea of how strong servants are, the next videos will focus on grand servants and power creeping. Stay tuned.